The moment I saw my son, my heart sank. There was something undeniably off about the way he looked. Not that he wasn't adorable, he was a spitting image of my wife's brother-in-law, Tom. I mean, seriously, the kid could be his mini-me. The resemblance was too striking to ignore, and that's when the unease started to creep in. Sunday dinners were always a chaotic affair. My wife, her sister, and Tom, all chatting away while the kids played around. This time, though, the usual banter felt like background noise to me. Every time I looked at my son, my gut twisted. Nobody mentioned the resemblance, but I could see it in their eyes. The elephant in the room was practically tap dancing on the table, and we all pretended not to notice. As we drove home, my mind raced back to 7 years ago. I was out of the country for 3 months, and my wife had stayed with her sister and Tom. She announced her pregnancy just 2 weeks after I got back. Then she gave birth at 8 months, or was it really 9? I always found that fishy. The timeline just didn't add up, but I never pushed it. Until now, I couldn't shake off the suspicion, so I confided in my best friend. He's practically family, but I wasn't ready to call him my brother-in-law just yet. I laid out everything, and he listened, nodding thoughtfully. Why don't you get a paternity test? He suggested, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Yeah, because sneaking around to test your kid's DNA is totally normal. I mulled over the idea, considering the fallout if my fears were confirmed. What if my son wasn't mine? What would that do to my family? Despite the dread, I decided to go for it. I had to know the truth. Researching paternity tests without my wife finding out was trickier than I thought. I found a local lab and made a discreet appointment. Collecting the hair sample was another hurdle. One night, while my son slept, I snicked a few strands of hair. Guilt gnawed at me, but I had to see this through. I packaged the sample and sent it off, my nerves fraying more each day. Pretending everything was fine around my wife became an Oscar-worthy performance. My friend was my lifeline, sharing my anxiety and bolstering my resolve. We brainstormed scenarios, weighing the pros and cons of each possible outcome. The waiting was hell. My mind wouldn't shut up, constantly replaying worst-case scenarios. Work became a blur, and my wife noticed my distracted behavior. "Everything okay?" she asked one evening. I plastered on a smile and blamed it on work stress, hoping she bought it. To distract myself, I spent more time with my son, soaking up every precious moment. The guilt of doubting his paternity clashed with my love for him, making every second bittersweet. Finally, the call came from the lab. The results were ready. I scheduled a meeting to pick them up in person, my heart pounding like a drum. The drive there felt like the longest of my life, anticipation building with each passing mile. Sitting in the lab's office, I opened the envelope with trembling hands. The words blurred as my worst fear was confirmed. He wasn't mine. My world tilted, and I walked out in a daze, barely registering the drive that followed. I pulled over eventually, unable to process the shock alone. I called my friend, the one person who knew everything. We discussed what this meant, the next steps, and the storm that was about to hit my life. Despite the turmoil, I needed more evidence before confronting my wife. I couldn't afford any loose ends. Returning home, I put on the bravest face I could muster, all the while plotting my next move. The facade of normalcy had never felt so heavy, but the truth was out there, and I was determined to uncover it all. It was just another restless night when I found it, the burner phone, hidden under the guest bedroom mattress. It was like a bad movie cliché. Who even uses burner phones anymore? But there it was, taunting me. I flipped it over in my hands, noticing the fingerprint sensor. Great, because nothing screams trust issues like waiting for your wife to fall asleep so you can unlock her secret phone. That night, I lay there, waiting for her breathing to steady, signaling she was deep in sleep. My heart pounded in my chest as I carefully lifted her hand, trying not to wake her. I pressed her finger against the sensor, and the phone unlocked with a soft click. Bingo! What I found hit me like a freight train, incriminating messages, photos, videos, every sort of detail of her affair with Tom, my supposed brother-in-law. I felt a surge of anger, hot and blinding, but I kept my composure. There was no room for a meltdown now. I took screenshots of everything, saving the damning evidence on a secure drive. I needed all the ammo I could get. Over the next few days, I combed through the phone, gathering more evidence. Each new discovery felt like a punch to the gut. Videos of them together, messages detailing their 7-year affair, 7 years. That's practically our entire marriage. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but I couldn't let emotions cloud my judgment. I needed to stay focused, to collect enough proof to confront her and Tom. I avoided her as much as possible, not wanting to tip her off. Every interaction felt like a performance, each smile forced and hollow. I confided in my best friend, sharing the new findings. He was as shocked as I was, but offered solid advice. We concocted a plan to confront them both, simultaneously. This was going to be a showdown. I invited them over for a family meeting, under the pretext of discussing some vague family matters. They arrived, oblivious to the storm about to hit. I had strategically set up recording devices around the living room, ensuring every word would be captured. As we sat down, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This was it, the moment of truth. I began by calmly presenting the evidence, watching as their faces twisted from confusion to shock. My wife broke down, tears streaming down her face as she tried to explain and apologize. Tom, on the other hand, attempted to justify their actions, spewing some nonsense about love and mistakes. My anger boiled over. I demanded the truth about their plans to run away to Norway, to take my son, no, Tom's son, and start a new life. My wife admitted everything, confirming my worst fears and shattering any remnants of trust. I felt my heart break all over again. But this time, there was no going back. The confrontation left us all drained, the silence heavy with unspoken words and shattered lives. I watched as they left, their faces pale, knowing their lives were about to change forever. As for me, I had decisions to make, a future to rebuild from the wreckage they left behind. Kicking them out was strangely satisfying. Get out, I said, voice cold and steady. My wife and Tom just stared, stunned. I didn't care. They had torn my life apart, and now they had to go. I watched as they gathered their things, avoiding eye contact, and finally left. I slammed the door behind them, feeling a mix of anger and relief. First order of business. Change the locks. I called a locksmith right away. No way was I going to risk them waltzing back in here. Next, I called my lawyer. I want a divorce and sole custody of my son, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of determination and fear. The lawyer assured me we'd get started immediately. I wasn't messing around. My son needed stability, and I couldn't trust her to provide it. Informing my wife's family was a nightmare. The shock, the disbelief, it was like a bad soap opera. They tried to defend her at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. The family split, some siding with her, others with me. It was a mess, but it had to be done. I needed to make sure everyone knew the truth. Selling the house was the next step. Every room held memories, now tainted and painful. I contacted a real estate agent and started the process, planning my move abroad. A fresh start for me and my son. It felt like the only way to escape the ghosts of the past. Through it all, I focused on maintaining a normal routine for my son. Breakfast, school, playtime, anything to keep his life as stable as possible. Friends and family rallied around us, their support a lifeline. They helped with everything from paperwork to packing, keeping me sane in the chaos. The legal battle was brutal. My wife contested the divorce and custody arrangements, dragging us into court. Each session was a new level of hell, with accusations flying from both sides. I presented my evidence, the paternity test, the affair documentation. She tried to spin it, claiming mutual consent and misunderstandings. But the judge saw through it, considering all the evidence and testimonies. My lawyer was a rock, arguing fiercely for my rights. The paternity test, the affair, everything pointed to my wife's betrayal. We fought for full custody and property division, and after what felt like an eternity, the court ruled in my favor. Full custody of my son and permission to sell the house. It was a victory, but a bittersweet one. With the court's decision, I finalized the sale of house and started packing for our new life abroad. Finding a new home was both exciting and terrifying. I chose a quiet town in a different country, hoping for a fresh start. My son needed stability, and this seemed like the perfect place to rebuild our lives. Enrolling my son in the local school was a big step. He was nervous, but the kids were friendly, and the teachers were supportive. He adjusted quickly, finding friends and settling into the routine. I found a job, throwing myself into work to provide for us. The routine helped, giving us both a sense of normalcy. Reconnecting with old friends and making new ones was surprisingly easy. People were kind, understanding our situation without prying too much. My support network grew, helping me rebuild my life piece by piece. Every day was a step forward, a little bit closer to healing. Occasionally, thoughts of the past would creep in. The betrayal, the anger, it never fully went away. But I focused on the future, on my son and our new lives. We started to heal, finding happiness in the little things. Laughter, new adventures, the simple joy of a fresh start. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. We had come through the storm, stronger and ready for whatever came next. Just when I thought things were settling down, my phone rang. It was her. Months had passed since the courtroom drama, and I had almost forgotten the sound of her voice. Almost. John, I made a terrible mistake, she said, her voice cracking. Oh, the irony. She sounded desperate, pleading for forgiveness. I let her talk, keeping my responses short and neutral. She went on about how she was struggling, financially, emotionally, you name it. Part of me felt a pang of pity. The other part, well, it was busy being pissed off. I kept my cool, offering minimal support. You need to sort yourself out, I said, trying to sound as detached as possible. Her sobs on the other end of the line were like nails on a chalkboard. Hanging up, I couldn't shake the mix of emotions. Pity, anger, a touch of vindication. It was exhausting. Reflecting on the past few months, the emotional toll hit me hard. Betrayal wasn't something you just got over. It lingered, like a bad smell. But I had a new life to focus on, a son who needed me. No time to wallow in past mistakes, hers or mine. Dating again was interesting. I was cautious, to say the least. Trust didn't come easy anymore. But then I met her, a kind woman with the patience of a saint. She knew about my past and didn't flinch. We took it slow, giving me time to rebuild my trust in others. My son adored her, which was a huge relief. Seeing them bond brought a kind of joy I hadn't felt in ages. Introducing her to my close friends was the real test. Their approval meant everything, and thankfully, they liked her. Slowly, I began to feel a sense of hope and happiness that I thought was lost forever. We talked about our future, making plans that didn't include the shadow of betrayal hanging over us. My new relationship flourished, bringing a stability I craved. Work was going well too. I threw myself into my job, excelling in my new role. My son thrived in school, making friends and enjoying his activities. Life was good. No, life was great. We became active in the community, joining events and making connections. People respected me for my resilience, my ability to bounce back from such a personal crisis. Sometimes, I'd look back on my journey and feel a surge of pride. I had come a long way from those dark days of doubt and betrayal. Discussions with my partner about our future became more frequent. We talked about travel, new adventures, and possibly even expanding our family. Every conversation was filled with excitement and hope. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil of the past. Life had become a series of happy, fulfilling moments. Simple joys, like a day at the park with my son, or a quiet evening at home with my partner, felt like treasures. The past was still there, a silent reminder of where I'd been, but it no longer dictated my present. We were moving forward, step by step, building a future free from the shadows of betrayal. You know those days when everything's going smoothly, and you think, hey, maybe life's finally cut me some slack. Yeah, that was me, just casually shopping for groceries, not a care in the world. Then, bam, there he was. Tom, my former brother-in-law. The man who turned my life into a soap opera. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, the world stopped. The air was thick with tension, and I could feel the old anger bubbling up. He opened his mouth, probably to spit out some half-baked apology, but I wasn't having it. Cold greetings were exchanged. more out of social obligation than any real desire to speak. Tom tried to apologize, his voice dripping with regret, but I walked away. I wasn't about to let him drag me back into the past. The memories flooded back, those nights of doubt, the betrayal, the heartbreak. But I stayed strong. I had moved on, and I wasn't about to let this chance encounter derail my progress. I got home and told my partner about running into Tom. She listened, her support unwavering. Talking it out reaffirmed my decision to cut ties with the past. Tom was a chapter I'd closed, and I intended to keep it that way. We agreed that avoiding further contact was the best move. My life now was about my son, my partner, and the future we were building together. Time passed, and years later, I found myself looking back on the journey. What a ride it had been. My son was growing up, showing talent in so many areas. His laughter was the soundtrack of my new life, a constant reminder of why I fought so hard to move forward. My relationship was rock solid, filled with love and mutual respect. We planned our future together, excited about the adventures that awaited us. Travel, new experiences, maybe even expanding our family. It all seemed possible now. Gratitude filled my heart whenever I thought about the support from my friends and family. They had been my pillars, helping me stand when I thought I couldn't. Their belief in me had been a lifeline, and I was endlessly thankful. Every now and then, I'd share my story with others, not to dwell on the past, but to offer hope and resilience. Life throws curveballs, but you can come out the other side stronger. My tale was proof of that. Realizing how far I'd come, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The pain, the struggle, it had all led to a place of strength and happiness. My life was mine again,